The evening was quiet, almost eerily so, as I sat in the living room pretending to be absorbed in a book I couldn't actually comprehend. My mind was elsewhere, fixated on Emily as she moved about our bedroom with a purpose and excitement I hadn't seen in years. The clock ticked away, marking the passage of time and the growing knot in my stomach. "Going out again tonight?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of the turmoil brewing inside me. "Yes, another dinner with the team," Emily replied, her voice floating down the hallway, light and carefree. "Richard says it's crucial for networking." Richard, her boss. The man who had slowly, insidiously, made his way into every facet of Emily's work life, and now, it seemed, beyond. I stood up, walking towards our bedroom. The door was ajar, and through the gap, I watched her. She was beautiful, undeniably so. The way she moved with such grace and confidence always took my breath away. But tonight her beauty felt like a weapon against me. She didn't notice me at first, too focused on the mirror as she applied her makeup with an artist's precision. The dress she chose next caught my eye immediately, a slinky, elegant number that I had never seen before. It was the kind of dress that didn't just hang off the hanger in a store. It was chosen, selected for a purpose. "That's a new dress," I remarked, leaning against the doorway. Emily turned, a smile playing on her lips. "Do you like it?" she asked, twirling a bit. "I got it on sale last week, couldn't resist." "It's beautiful," I admitted, my heart sinking further. "Seems fancy for a team dinner, though." She laughed, a sound that used to fill our home with warmth. "Well, you never know who you'll meet. Richard always says we should dress to impress." Dress to impress. The words echoed in my mind, a sinister undertone to their seemingly innocent meaning. I watched her, the way she meticulously chose her jewelry, her shoes, her perfume, each choice a statement, a message not meant for me. "Emily," I started, my voice steady despite the storm inside, "is there something going on with Richard?" She paused, her expression shifting ever so slightly before she masked it with another bright smile. "What? No, of course not. He's my boss, that's all. You know how important this job is to me." I wanted to believe her, to push away the doubts and the fears that had been gnawing at me. But as she kissed me goodbye, promising she wouldn't be late, a cold certainty settled in my heart. This was not just another dinner, and Emily was not just my loving wife heading out to meet her team. As the door closed behind her, the silence of the house enveloped me. I was left alone with my thoughts, my fears, and a decision to make. How far was I willing to go to uncover the truth? And was I prepared for what I might find? Tonight was a turning point, the beginning of a journey into a darkness I never imagined existed within the confines of our seemingly perfect life. But I had to know. I had to find out if the woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, was truly the person I thought she was. A month had passed since the uneasy feelings first took root in my heart. That evening, as I accompanied Emily to her company's annual dinner, I hoped to dispel the growing shadows of doubt with laughter and camaraderie. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The venue was opulent, a testament to the success of Emily's law firm. I mingled, drink in hand, playing the part of the supportive spouse among a sea of suits and sequins. Emily was radiant, a beacon of charm and grace, effortlessly weaving through the crowd, her laughter a melody that drew people to her. "John, isn't it?" A voice cut through the din of conversation. It was Richard, Emily's boss. Tall, with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance, he extended a hand. "Glad you could make it." "Of course," I replied, shaking his hand. "Wouldn't miss it." Richard's gaze flickered over to Emily, who was engaged in conversation across the room. "She's a star, your wife, truly invaluable to the team." I nodded, a tight smile on my lips. I'm proud of her. As the evening progressed, I watched as Richard found every excuse to be near Emily, his touches lingering, his gaze a little too intense. It was during dinner, seated at a table adorned with crystal and silver, that my discomfort grew into a tangible concern. "You've outdone yourself with this event, Richard," I said, attempting to gauge his reaction. He smiled. the gesture not quite reaching his eyes. It's all for the team. Happy employees are the key to success, after all. Emily leaned in, her hand finding mine under the table. John's been so supportive, she said, her voice warm. He understands how demanding my job can be. Richard's eyes flicked to our intertwined hands, and for a moment, I saw something dark flash across his face. Of course, he said, his tone light once again. It's important to have a supportive partner. The conversation shifted, the evening wore on, but the seed of unease had taken root. As we danced, Emily's head resting against my chest, I whispered, "Is everything okay with Richard? He seems attentive." She pulled back slightly, searching my face. "He's just being nice, John. That's how he is with everyone." But as Richard cut in, asking Emily for a dance with a smirk that felt like a challenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that his intentions were anything but benign. "Take care of my wife," I said through clenched teeth, trying to maintain a facade of civility. "So of course, John," Richard replied, his smirk widening. "You have nothing to worry about." As I watched them dance, Emily's laughter reaching my ears over the music, a cold realization settled in. This was more than just professional camaraderie. The way she looked at him, the way he held her a little too close, it was as if I were witnessing the pieces of a puzzle falling into place, a puzzle I had no desire to complete. The ride home was quiet, the air between us charged with unspoken words. As Emily drifted off to sleep next to me, her head on my shoulder, the weight of my suspicions felt like a physical burden. The trust and intimacy that had been the bedrock of our marriage felt tainted, corrupted by doubts I could no longer ignore. I knew then that I needed answers, not just for my peace of mind, but for the survival of our marriage. The question was, how far was I willing to go to uncover the truth? And more importantly, was I ready to face the consequences of what I might find? The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and restless days. My mind was consumed with doubt, and I found myself observing Emily's every move, searching for clues that might confirm my worst fears. The vibrant connection we once shared seemed to dim, replaced by a chasm of suspicion that neither of us dared to acknowledge. One evening, as Emily prepared for yet another late meeting, I decided it was time to confront the growing monster of doubt head-on. "Emily," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil within, "are these late meetings with Richard becoming more frequent?" She paused, her back to me, and for a moment, the silence between us was deafening. Then, without turning around, she replied, "It's a busy time for us, John. You know how it is." "But every night this week?" I pressed, needing to hear her say it, to deny the accusations that lay unspoken between us. Emily turned to face me, her expression a mixture of frustration and fatigue. "What do you want me to say, John? That I'm not committed to my job? That I don't care about my career?" "That's not what I'm saying, and you know it," I countered, feeling the gap between us widen. I miss you, Em, and I'm worried about us." For a moment, there was a flash of the woman I married, a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes. "I miss us too," she admitted softly. "But this is important to me, John. Please try to understand." I wanted to believe her, to trust in the love and commitment that had defined our marriage. But as the door closed behind her, leaving me alone once again, doubt crept in, whispering lies and fears into my ear. Determined to find the truth, I embarked on a plan that would forever alter the course of our lives. Surveillance equipment arrived in discreet packages, each one a piece of the puzzle I was desperate to solve. Cameras and microphones were placed strategically throughout our home, hidden from sight but ever watchful. I remember the weight of the decision, the moral quandary of invading the privacy of the woman I loved. But the need to know, to have my suspicions confirmed or denied, outweighed the guilt that gnawed at my conscience. The first night of surveillance was agonizing. I sat in the dim light of my makeshift monitoring station, watching the life I thought I knew play out on the screens before me. The normalcy of our evening routines, captured in stark clarity, did nothing to ease the tension that coiled tight in my chest. It wasn't until the second night that my worst fears were realized. Emily came home late, her movements hurried as she checked her phone repeatedly. Then, the call came, her voice a mixture of excitement and trepidation as she spoke. "Hi, Richard," she said, her tone different, more intimate than I had ever heard. "Yes, John's away on business. We have the whole night." My heart stopped, the blood in my veins turning to ice as I listened to her laughter, her promises. The betrayal was no longer a shadow of doubt but a glaring, painful truth that I could no longer deny. I confronted her the next day, my evidence laid bare between us. "Who are you, Emily?" I asked, the pain and betrayal evident in my voice. "How could you do this to us?" Her reaction was a mix of shock and denial, a desperate attempt to explain away the undeniable truth. "John, it's not what it looks like. Please, you have to believe me." But the trust that had been the foundation of our marriage was shattered, leaving behind a chasm too wide to bridge. The discovery of Emily's affair with Richard was a turning point, the moment our marriage began its slow, painful descent into oblivion. As I retreated into the shadows of our home, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, I realized that the search for truth had cost me everything. The woman I loved, the life we built together, was nothing more than a facade, a lie that I had unwittingly lived for far too long. As I settled into the sterile hotel room, miles away from home on a supposed business trip, the reality of my mission was far from professional. My laptop, the gateway to the truth I feared, sat heavy on the desk before me. With a deep breath, I connected to the live feed, the digital eye that had become my only link to the life I thought I knew. The screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of our bedroom, now transformed into a setting for a betrayal so profound, it threatened to unravel the very fabric of my being. There, in the room where we had shared countless dreams and whispered secrets in the dead of night, Emily prepared to welcome Richard into our sacred space. I watched, a silent voyeur to my own tragedy, as Emily adorned herself with lingerie that was never meant for my eyes. The care with which she applied her makeup, the deliberate choice of perfume, it was a ritual of preparation for another, not for the man she had vowed to love and cherish. The doorbell rang, and through the digital eye, I watched Richard enter our home. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, only the familiarity of two people who had crossed the boundaries of decency and loyalty. "Emily, you look breathtaking." Richard's voice, smooth and confident, floated through the microphone. "Thank you, Richard. I've been looking forward to this," Emily replied, her tone filled with an anticipation that cut through me like a blade. The intimacy that followed, captured in excruciating detail by the camera, was a brutal blow to my heart. I watched, powerless, as they embraced, their laughter and tender touches a stark testament to the depth of their betrayal. "Is this what you want, Emily? To be with me? Here? Like this?" Richard whispered, his words barely audible over the sound of my breaking heart. "Yes." Emily's response was a whisper, but to me it was a scream that echoed through the hollow chambers of my soul. "I want this. I want you." How could she? The question repeated itself in my mind, a relentless torment. Emily, the woman I loved, the mother of our children, had become a stranger, her actions a repudiation of everything we had built together. I wanted to look away, to spare myself the agony of witnessing their betrayal further, but I was transfixed, a prisoner of my need to understand, to see the extent of the lie my life had become. The love and passion she expressed for Richard were an affront, a vivid reminder of the distance that had grown between us. What hurt the most was not just the physical betrayal, but the emotional investment, the evident affection she had for him. It was a stark contrast to the coldness that had crept into our own interactions, a coldness I now understood was not born of distraction or stress, but of infidelity. As the night wore on, and I watched them share what was meant to be ours alone, I knew that the path ahead was irrevocably altered. The marriage I had fought to preserve, to believe in, was built on a foundation of deceit. When the screen finally went dark, and I was left alone with the weight of my shattered illusions, I realized that the journey ahead was one I would have to walk alone. The woman I had pledged my life to was gone, replaced by a phantom of betrayal that I could neither forgive nor forget. In the deafening silence of the hotel room, I mourned the death of my marriage, the loss of my partner, and the end of the innocence I had clung to so desperately. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The life I had known, the love I had cherished, was nothing more than a beautifully crafted lie. The journey back from my business trip was a blur, each mile bringing me closer to the confrontation I both dreaded and craved. My mind raced with the images I had witnessed, the undeniable proof of Emily's infidelity. By the time I reached our home, I was a storm of emotion, a tumultuous mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. I parked the car in the driveway. The familiar sight of our home, now a symbol of deception. The lights were on, casting a warm glow that belied the coldness that had settled in my heart. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for what was to come. As I entered, the sound of laughter greeted me, an intimacy that once belonged to us, now shared between Emily and Richard. They were in the living room, so engrossed in each other that my arrival went unnoticed. For a moment, I stood there, watching the woman I loved with another man, the pain so acute it was almost paralyzing. "Emily," I finally said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. They both turned, surprise etched on their faces. Emily's eyes widened in shock, a myriad of emotions passing through them before settling on fear. Richard, however, recovered quickly, his expression morphing into one of defiance. "John, what are you doing here?" Emily stammered, rising to her feet. "You're supposed to be on a trip." "I came back early," I said, my gaze fixed on her, searching for any trace of the woman I married. "Seems I returned just in time." Richard stood, positioning himself between Emily and me, a protective gesture that only fueled my anger. "Now, John, let's not do anything rash," he said, his voice laced with condescension. "Rash?" I echoed, laughter devoid of humor escaping me. "What's rash is thinking you could betray me in my own home and not face consequences." Emily's hands were shaking. "John, please, let's talk about this." "Talk?" I spat out the word as if it were poison. "I'm past talking, Emily. I saw everything." The room was charged with tension, a standoff between love betrayed and deception revealed. I took a step forward, my focus solely on Richard. "You," I began, my voice a low growl. "You invaded my life, my home. You're going to pay for that." Richard's attempt to remain calm faltered as he saw the resolve in my eyes. "John, I think you're misunderstanding the situation," he tried to explain, but his words fell on deaf ears. Without another word, I lunged at him, my pent-up rage finding an outlet. The scuffle was brief but intense, years of trust and love crumbling into violence. Richard, caught off guard, stumbled and fell, a tangible representation of the shattered illusion of my marriage. Emily cried out, rushing to Richard's side. "John, stop, please. You're hurting him." "Hurting him?" I echoed, the irony bitter on my tongue. "What about me, Emily? What about my pain?" The room fell silent, the aftermath of the confrontation a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. Emily, tears streaming down her face, looked up at me, the realization of what had been lost reflected in her eyes. "I'm sorry, John," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you." But it was too late for apologies, too late to undo the damage. As I looked at her, at them, I knew there was no turning back. The trust that had been the foundation of our marriage was irrevocably broken, the love we shared tarnished by betrayal. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the remnants of what had once been my life. The storm of emotions that had carried me here had abated, leaving in its wake a profound sense of loss and a determination to rebuild, to find a way forward from the ruins of my shattered heart. The dust had settled in the aftermath of the confrontation, the air heavy with unsaid words and broken promises. The once warm and inviting living room of our home now felt cold and foreign, a battleground where the final stand of my marriage had taken place. Richard had left, nursing more than just a bruised ego, while Emily and I sat across from each other, the distance between us more than just physical. The silence was oppressive, a tangible force that seemed to squeeze the very air from the room. I broke the silence, my voice steady despite the turmoil that raged within. "I have evidence, Emily," I began, watching her closely for any reaction. Recordings of everything. Her eyes widened, fear and realization dawning in equal measure. "John, please?" she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You wouldn't—" "I don't want to hurt you, Emily," I said, the truth of the words cutting deep. "But I can't just let this go. You both made your choice and now there are consequences." Emily's hands trembled in her lap, and she looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "What do you want from us?" she asked, resignation lacing her words. "I want you both to understand the gravity of your actions," I replied. "I want an assurance that this ends now, that you'll both take responsibility for the hurt you've caused. And if we don't?" Her voice was hollow, a shadow of the vibrant woman I had once known. "Then I go public with the recordings," I stated flatly. "Your reputations, your careers, everything you've worked for will be in jeopardy." The weight of my words hung heavily between us, a stark reminder of the precipice upon which we now stood. It was not a threat made lightly, nor was it my desire to follow through. Yet the betrayal demanded acknowledgement, a reckoning of sorts. After a long pause, Emily nodded, the fight gone from her. "I understand," she said, her voice laden with sorrow. "We'll do whatever it takes to make this right." It was the closest thing to a concession I would get, a tacit acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. As I stood to leave, pausing at the door to glance back at the shell of the life we had shared, a part of me mourned the loss of what could have been. "I hope one day you'll understand why I had to do this," I said, more to myself than to her. Emily didn't respond, her silence a testament to the chasm that now lay between us. With a heavy heart, I stepped out of the house, leaving behind the shattered remnants of my marriage. The decision to hold the recordings over them was not made out of malice, but out of a desperate need for some semblance of justice, a way to ensure they could not simply walk away from the wreckage unscathed. It was a hollow victory, one that offered little solace in the face of such profound loss. As I drove away, the finality of the moment settled over me like a shroud. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the pain of betrayal and the daunting task of rebuilding. But for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope, a sense that eventually I might find my way through the darkness. The days following the confrontation were filled with a heavy silence, the kind that suffocates any attempt at normalcy. Emily and I moved around each other like ghosts, remnants of a life that once was. The decision that lay before us was clear, yet the weight of it pressed down with an unbearable heaviness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room we once shared, Emily broke the silence. "John, can we talk?" Her voice was tentative, a stark contrast to the confidence she once radiated. I nodded, the simple act feeling like a monumental effort. We sat at opposite ends of the dining table, a physical manifestation of the emotional gulf between us. I know there's no excuse for what I did," Emily began, her eyes not meeting mine. "But I need you to believe it meant nothing. It was just a sex." The words, meant to offer some solace, only served to deepen the wound. "Just a sex," I repeated, the bitterness evident in my tone. "And what about us, Emily? Was everything we had just a sex too?" "No, John, of course not," she rushed to explain, finally looking up. "You are everything to me. I lost my way." The simplicity of her explanation, the attempt to reduce our unraveling to a mere lapse in judgment, felt like a slap in the face. The woman sitting before me, pleading for understanding, was a stranger. The depth of our connection, once unbreakable, had been eroded by deceit and carelessness. "Emily, I can't just overlook this. I can't pretend everything is fine," I said, the weight of my decision settling in. "Our marriage, it's broken beyond repair. I think we both know that divorce is the only way forward." The word divorce hung in the air between us, a finality that neither of us could escape. Emily's face crumpled, the reality of our situation finally breaking through her defenses. "Is there really no other way? Can't we try to work through this?" she asked, desperation creeping into her voice. I shook my head, the pain of the decision etched into every word. "How can we? Trust is the foundation of our marriage, and that's been shattered." I don't know how to rebuild from this, Emily. I don't even know if I want to." Tears streamed down her cheeks, a silent testament to the shared heartbreak of two people who once thought their love was invincible. "I'm so sorry, John," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I replied, the acknowledgement doing little to ease the ache in my heart. "But the damage is done." In the days that followed, we began the painful process of unraveling the life we had built together. Conversations were logistical, practical, devoid of the warmth that had characterized our relationship. With each signed document, with every division of shared memories, the finality of our marriage's end became more real. The decision to divorce was not made out of anger or a desire for revenge. It was a recognition of the irrevocable change that had occurred between us, a mutual understanding that some wounds are too deep to heal. As I packed my belongings, leaving behind the physical remnants of our life together, I realized that the hardest part was not the ending. It was the letting go of the dream of what could have been and the acceptance of what was. In the quiet aftermath of our tumultuous separation, I found myself wrestling with an array of conflicting emotions. The raw hurt from Emily's betrayal had once fueled a desire for retribution, a need to see her experience a fraction of the pain her actions had inflicted upon me. Yet, as I watched her world begin to unravel, a profound realization dawned upon me. The satisfaction I had imagined revenge would bring was utterly hollow. Emily's professional reputation, once sterling, now bore the scars of our private ordeal. Colleagues whispered in the corridors, their respect eroded by the tide of scandal. Her once vibrant social circle had diminished, leaving her isolated in her most vulnerable moments. One day I encountered Emily by chance outside her office, a shell of the vibrant person I once knew. "John," she greeted me, her voice devoid of its former warmth. "Emily," I replied, noting the fatigue etched into her features. "How are you holding up?" She offered a wry smile, a gesture that failed to reach her eyes. "As well as can be expected, given the circumstances." The conversation that followed was stilted, a dance around the elephant in the room. Yet, as we spoke, a pang of regret twisted in my gut. Witnessing her descent, the tangible consequences of her actions laid bare, did not bring the closure I had sought. Instead, it left a bitter taste, a sense of pity for the woman who once meant the world to me. "Seeing everything fall apart around you, it's not what I wanted," I confessed, the admission surprising even myself. Emily's gaze met mine, a flicker of surprise passing through her eyes. "I never thought it would come to this," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for everything, John, truly." Her apology, sincere as it was, did not erase the past, nor did it dampen the ache of betrayal. Yet in that moment I realized that clinging to anger and seeking revenge only served to prolong my own suffering. "I know," was all I could muster in response, a tacit acknowledgement of the complex web of emotions that still bound us. As we parted ways, a sense of melancholy enveloped me. The fantasy of revenge had promised a sense of justice, a closure to the chapter of our lives that had ended so abruptly. Yet the reality was far more nuanced. Emily's downfall, rather than offering solace, had underscored the futility of harboring resentment. In the solitude of reflection, I came to understand that true healing lay not in the downfall of the one who wronged me, but in the capacity to forgive, to release the hold that bitterness and anger had on my heart. The path forward was fraught with challenges, a journey of self-discovery and forgiveness that I was only just beginning to navigate. The end of our marriage marked the close of a significant chapter in my life, but it also heralded the start of another. As I sought to rebuild from the ashes of our shared past, I clung to the hope that in time, I would find peace, not in the suffering of others, but in the grace of letting go and moving forward. The transition to my new life was marked not by the freedom I had envisioned, but by a profound sense of solitude. My once shared world had been dismantled, piece by piece, leaving me to navigate the remnants of a life I scarcely recognized. In the quiet moments, I found myself reflecting on the ruins of our marriage, the memories tainted by the bitterness of betrayal and the futile pursuit of vengeance. It was during one such evening, as I sat amidst the boxes of an apartment that felt more like a way station than a home, that I received a call from Claire, Emily's sister, and surprisingly still a friend. Her voice was hesitant, a clear indication that the conversation to follow was not to be an easy one. "John, I'm worried about Emily," she began, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. She's not doing well." The concern in Claire's voice stirred a complex mix of emotions within me. Despite everything, hearing of Emily's struggles elicited a pang of concern, a remnant of the love that once bound us together. "I know we're not exactly on the best of terms, but she needs help, John. She's fallen into a deep depression," Claire continued, her voice lacered with worry. The news struck a chord, a stark reminder of the human cost of our shared tragedy. I don't know what you want me to do, Claire," I admitted, my voice betraying the conflict that raged within. "I don't know either," she confessed. I thought you should know." The call ended shortly after, leaving me to ponder the path that had led us here. Emily's descent into despair was a testament to the destructive power of betrayal, a vivid illustration of the pain that rippled outward, touching more lives than just our own. In the days that followed, I wrestled with the knowledge of Emily's condition. The once vibrant woman I loved, full of life and ambition, had become a shell of her former self, a casualty not just of my actions, but of her own choices as well. The realization brought with it a heavy heart. Our quest for happiness had led us down a path of mutual destruction. I found myself at a crossroads, torn between the desire to move forward and the lingering ties that bound me to the past. The quest for vengeance, once a driving force, had left behind a bitter taste, a stark reminder of the cost of such pursuits. As I pondered the ruins of our marriage, I began to understand that healing was not a journey I could embark upon alone. Forgiveness, I realized, was the key, not just for Emily, but for myself as well. The path to forgiveness was fraught with difficulty, a process of acknowledging the pain, accepting the past, and letting go of the anger and resentment that had taken root. In the solitude of my new life, I made a decision. It was time to reach out, to offer support, not as a husband, but as a fellow human being who had shared a life, a love, and now, a profound loss. This gesture of compassion, I hoped, would be the first step toward healing, a way to mend the wounds that had been inflicted and to find peace amidst the ruins. Months turned into years, and with time's passage, the sharp edges of my pain began to dull, softened by the healing balm of new beginnings. In this chapter of my life, I was fortunate enough to find love again, a gentle soul named Anna, whose kindness and understanding touched the deepest, most fractured parts of my heart. She didn't try to fix me. Instead, she simply offered me the space to heal, showing me that love, even after profound hurt, was possible. One evening, as Anna and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, she turned to me, her hand finding mine. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" she asked, not with jealousy, but with an open-hearted concern. I sighed, the ghosts of my past never too far away. "Sometimes, I wonder if the scars will ever fully heal," I admitted. Anna squeezed my hand gently, a wordless gesture of support. "Scars are just stories, John. They're reminders of what we've survived, not just marks of what's broken." Her words resonated with me, a beacon of wisdom guiding me toward a truth I had struggled to accept. "I know you're right," I said, turning to meet her gaze. "It's just hard to let go completely. The past feels like a chain holding me back." Anna nodded, understanding coloring her features. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, John. It's about freeing yourself. Have you ever thought about truly forgiving Emily? Not for her, but for you?" Her question lingered in the air between us, a challenge to the barriers I had built around my heart. Forgiveness had seemed an insurmountable task, a surrender to the very forces that had torn my life apart. Yet as I reflected on Anna's words, I began to understand that holding on to anger and resentment served only to imprison me in a past I could not change. In the weeks that followed, I embarked on a journey of introspection, confronting the shadows of my past with a newfound determination. I penned a letter to Emily, not expecting a reply or seeking reconciliation, but as a means to vocalize the forgiveness that had long eluded me. "Emily," I wrote, "I've carried the weight of our past for too long, allowing it to shape my present and cloud my future. I've realized that forgiveness is the key to moving forward. I forgive you, not because what happened doesn't matter, but because I no longer want to be held captive by the pain. I wish you peace and healing, just as I've found." Sending the letter felt like releasing a breath I hadn't known I'd been holding. It was an act of liberation, a step toward severing the chains that had bound me to a cycle of hurt and regret. However, Emily never read the letter. In the evening, her sister Claire called and whispered in a trembling voice, "John, Emily is gone. She died today." And sobbing, she hung up the phone. In the evening, I walked through the city, silent tears covering my eyes. I was very sorry that she never found out that I had forgiven her long ago. I guess deep down I still loved her.